Before jumping into the league, I just want to give you a quick overview of what my deck list looks like. I'm going to assume that you have a rough idea of what Modern or Legacy Burn looks like, so I'm just going to focus on the parts that are specific to Pauper Burn. We're playing 18 lands, 3 Forgotten Caves which enter the battlefield tapped, and we can also cycle them for 1 red mana, which is good to mitigate flood late game. And in the early game we just don't care about playing a Forgotten Cave on turn 1, because we don't do much on turn 1 in Pauper anyway. The format itself is a lot slower than Legacy or Modern. And what would you sometimes kill on turn 3? That happens very rarely. Yeah, 50 mountains and then all the good spells that we know from the other formats. Rift Bolts, Lava Spikes, Chain Lightnings, Lightning Bolts, Stream Blazes and Fire Blasts. All playsets. Yeah, not much to say there. The first card that is specific to Pauper is the Curse of the Pierced Heart. As I said, Pauper is more slow than other formats, so playing a Curse of the Pierced Heart, which deals just 1 damage per turn, seems a bit slow, but it's very nice against control decks. If you resolve this in game 1 against blue-black control, for example, you probably will win the game, because they can't remove it unless they bounce it, which is an effect that is very rare, or have Hydroblast, which they only play from the sideboard. After playing the Curse of the Pierced Heart, you are able to play the Needle Drop on the opponent's turn, which deals 1 damage and then draws a card, but it only deals 1 damage to a player or creature that was already dealt damage this turn. So something I often do with this is, if you keep a 1-lander with a Rift Bolt and a Needle Drop, that's usually fine because you can suspend the Rift Bolt turn 1, and on turn 2 the Rift Bolt resolves, and if you don't draw a land, you can just Needle Drop and draw another card, and your chances of getting a second land is quite good. Then we have the creatures, Thermal Alchemist and Firebrand Archer. They look a bit weak when you compare them to Goblin Guide and the Monastery Swift Spear that we know from other formats, but they are really very, very strong. The Thermal Alchemist deals 1 damage to each opponent if you tap it, and it untaps if you play an instant or sorcery. This means that it deals 1 damage guaranteed per turn, which is very valuable, and it also blocks against decks like Stompies. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, but definitely blocks elves all day long. The problem is that it needs to untap to do anything, so against control decks it just dies. Firebrand Archer is stronger, so if we get an attack in, it deals more damage per turn than Thermal Alchemist, and also it triggers on any non-creature spell that we cast. So it also triggers on Curse of the Pierced Heart, which the Thermal Alchemist doesn't trigger off, and against control decks it's also more valuable, because we can just play the Firebrand Archer, then follow up with Chain Lightning, and that's when the opponent gets priority, the possibility to kill the Firebrand Archer, but at that point it has already triggered and already deals 1 damage, and of course in response to the kill spell we can always play a Lightning Bolt or a Fire Blast to deal even more damage of Firebrand Archer triggers. Then we have 2 flag slots, which I have a Shard Volley and the Magma Jet in right now. I used to play 2 Magma Jets, but I'm trying out the Shard Volley right now. Yeah, I'm not sure yet, but it seems fine. Onto the sideboard. I play 2 Electricaries and 4 Martyrs. Electricery is usually cast with Overload, so for 2 mana it deals 1 damage to every creature that we don't control. That's useful against Boreals if they don't have any enchantments up yet. It's also useful against Elves, although they do have some Elves that have 2 toughness, or if they play enchantments or spells that boost their toughness, that's a bit risky. It doesn't hit everything, but still nice to have. Usually we want it against Mono Blue Delver, which plays Spellscepter Sprites, which counters the spell if it enters the battlefield at instant speed, with converted mana cost equal or less than the number of fairies they control. So what we do is we let the Spellscepter Sprite resolve, then we play Electricity, their whole board, or all the fairies they control basically die, and their trigger fizzles. So they can't counter our spell that we just played. The Martyr comes in against Elves, which is just a total board wipe. They have almost nothing that can survive this. Against Affinity, it's a bit difficult because we usually want to deal 4 damage to Affinity creatures, so we have to hold up 4 red cards in our hand. But if we know that, it's manageable. And against Boggles, of course. Then I have 3 Celt Marauders. That's not the normal configuration, I would say. Marauders were played before in the main deck, before we had Firebrand Archer and Thermal Alchemist. But as I said, they are, especially the Thermal Alchemist, is useless against, for example, blue-black or mono-black control. They will just die before we can untap every time. So I side them out against the Marauders, because the Marauders will deal at least 2 damage. And that's much better than dealing no damage like the Thermal Alchemist. We also have 3 Molten Rains, which you probably know already. They are good against any deck that plays 2 colors. Well, most decks that play 2 colors, because they will usually play lands that enter the battlefield tapped and gain a life, or also the dual lands which bounce a land when they enter the battlefield, but if you tap them they produce 2 mana. So if we Molten Rain one of those dual lands, we throw them back by 2 turns and deal damage. That's really good. And then we have 3 Smash to Smithereens against Affinity, and also against Kuldotha Boros, for example, which are artifact-based decks. Artifact lands are legal in Pauper, so smashing a land on turn 2 and dealing 3 damage, that's just really strong.